These are the top 8 sites to see when you visit Galveston, Texas, and hang on to the end of the video for a bonus site very few know about or get to see. Galveston, Texas is mainly known for 3 things: its beaches, the seawall, and a deadly hurricane. But Galveston is so much more. It has gorgeous historic homes, museums that remind us of bygone days, and fun activities for the entire family. So let's get started with Galveston. Number 1 is Galveston Beach. Okay, let's just be honest. Galveston's beaches aren't like beaches in Florida or the Caribbean. The sand's a bit brown, the water's not crystal blue, and there's some seaweed. But people love to come to Galveston Beach to relax, get some sun, and have some fun. And one of the funnest places along Galveston Beach is the historic Pleasure Pier. Opened along the seawall in 1906, it was originally a recreational facility for the United States military, but in the 1940s it was transformed into the Galveston Pleasure Pier, and at the time it was the largest of its kind in the United States. Now, if you're feeling sure-footed and adventurous, you can walk out on the granite jetties. The 2 original jetties were built in the late 1800s at the entrance to Galveston Bay. However, the jetties along the beach were built in the 1960s to help break up waves and slow erosion. The same pink granite was also used in building the seawall in the early 1900s. We'll talk about that in just a moment. In certain places you can go out on these jetties and fish, but just make sure you have a Texas fishing license. This is the Galveston seawall. It was constructed following the hurricane of 1900, in which officials estimate between 8,000 and 12,000 people were killed. Many were washed out to sea and never seen again. The truth is, nobody will ever really know how many people died. It was the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. This is the place where on September 8, 1900 at 8 p.m. the hurricane made landfall with a 16-foot storm surge that flooded the city. Imagine being totally unaware that a Category 4 hurricane was approaching. That's what Galvestonians faced. This bronze statue was crafted by Galveston artist David Moore in 2000 to mark the 100th anniversary of the hurricane and remember those who died and survived. Number 2 on the list of things to see in Galveston is the Moody Mansion. It was purchased by W.L. Moody Jr. shortly after the hurricane of 1900. He and his wife, Libby, raised 4 children here. Moody was a big name in Galveston, and he was one of the wealthiest men in America. He made his fortune from insurance, banking, cotton trading, ranching, publishing, hotels, and railroads. Oh, and they had a lot of cars. This is the porte-cochere under which drivers of horse-drawn carriages and later vehicles would stop in order to drop off friends, family, and members of high society. The entryway immediately spoke to the wealth and power of the Moody family. This was Mr. Moody's office. Keep in mind, all the furnishings, books, and woodwork is original, and none of the woodwork has been redone. This was the sitting room, or the parlor. This would be where Mrs. Moody would greet visitors and chit-chat with her female friends about the local goings-on in Galveston. This was the dining room. Not the formal dining room. It was simply the dining room. They ate every meal here. And just off the dining room was the ballroom, where they would throw parties and hold dances. Of course, just outside the ballroom was the conservatory. Is that Colonel Mustard I see with a lead pipe in the conservatory? Next, we head to the family room. This is where they would sit, relax, and visit about the day, or maybe read the newspaper. Again, all the woodwork and furnishings are original. The staircase going to the second floor was, well, quite impressive. The upstairs bathroom had all the necessities, including a bidet, a pull-chain flush toilet, a bathtub, and a gas water heater so they could take hot baths. While the master bedroom was undergoing some routine maintenance, this was Mrs. Moody's changing room. How would you like that, ladies? Yeah, this is where she'd get dressed in the morning. Notice she had her own private bathtub. The second floor foyer was not only spectacularly decorated, but it was also a gallery featuring Mr. and Mrs. Moody, their 4 children, and Mr. and Mrs. Moody Sr. Number 3, what would a trip to Galveston be without watching some dolphins frolic? Okay, we're going to go out and look at some dolphins. Captain Brian there is going to take us, and hopefully he'll get us back safely too. He says he's never lost anyone, so we're going to take him at his word. Okay, we went out and it was like playing whack-a-mole to catch them on camera, but I managed to get a couple shots. However, as a history buff, this was really cool. This is the USS Texas in Galveston Bay being refurbished. This New York-class battleship was first commissioned in 1914. It saw action in World War I and became the flagship of the United States fleet in 1927. It was one of only 4 ships to hold that designation before 1941. It took part in the invasion of Normandy on D-Day. Then it was transferred to the Pacific Theater in 1944, where it engaged in the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. It was decommissioned in 1948. It had earned 5 battle stars. The last thing we saw on our Dolphin tour was the SS Selma. Now, I have to admit I'd never heard of a ship like this. She was constructed in Mobile, Alabama in 1919, and she was built, get this, out of concrete. That's right, a ship that actually floated built out of concrete. Since steel was in short supply because of the war, they began to build certain kinds of ships out of concrete. The Selma was a cargo ship and she served her country during World War I. Following the war, she hit a jetty in Mexico in 1920 and it cracked her hull. She was towed back to Galveston where it was determined that she could not be repaired. They dredged a 1,500-foot-long channel that was 25 feet deep, and after stripping her of all her valuable equipment, on March 9, 1922, she was towed out to her final berth, and she's been there ever since. She now serves as an artificial reef for sea life. While it's not illegal for people to get on the Selma, it's awfully dangerous and they don't recommend it. After all, it's been in salt water for over 100 years. However, in the 1940s, a guy came out there in his rowboat and took up residence among the ruins. He lived there for quite some time. They called him the Hermit of Galveston. Number 4, let's visit the Ellisa. This is the tall ship Ellisa. It's the 3rd oldest active sailing ship in America. It was in use in the late 1800s. This square-rigged iron bark was in a scrapyard in Greece, but in 1978 the Galveston Historical Foundation bought it and it was towed to Galveston for restoration. By 1982 it had been restored and was a floating museum. Now, it may seem strange to see the ship's steering wheel facing the back of the ship, but the pilot would be facing the front of the ship, looking at the compass in front of him. Okay, what do you say we take a look below deck? These were and are the crew's quarters. Now, they're not very glamorous, they don't look real comfortable, and you don't get much privacy. Oh, and you better not be claustrophobic. From the crew's quarters, you head into the chow hall and meeting room. Next, we head down to the engine room. You don't see much here. After all, this is still an active ship, but the engines are for when there's no wind. This is the main mast of the ship, and it sits right in the middle of the officers' dining hall. As they say, rank has its privileges. The officers had a nice, comfortable place to eat dinner. Just off the dining hall is the first mate's cabin. He had a desk, comfortable bench, a chest of drawers, windows, and an open bunk. Next is the second mate's cabin, a little more spacious than the first mate's, but a few less amenities. Of course, the captain had it made. He had a large salon area in which he could run the day-to-day operations of the ship in comfort and entertain business clients while in port. Or he could sit at his desk and work. Behind his desk was his quarters with a couch, large bed, drawers, and a couple windows. It wasn't as large as his junior officers, but then again, he had a desk and a salon. And again, rank has its privileges. Now, as you leave the captain's quarters, you go up some steep and narrow steps to the deck of the ship. Of course, the most important room on any ship is the galley or the kitchen. If you want men to work, they've got to have a full belly. The tall ship Ellisa is really a must-see if you go to Galveston. The number 5 must-see spot in Galveston is the Bishop's Palace. Built between 1887 and 1892, this was originally the home of Walter and Josephine Gresham and their 9 children. During the hurricane of 1900, the Greshams opened their home to hundreds of survivors. In 1923, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Galveston purchased the home to serve as the residence of Bishop Christopher Byrne. You start the tour in the basement. You can still see the artwork from when the Greshams owned the house. The basement also housed the kitchen and the servants' quarters. As you leave the basement, you go up a set of stairs that takes you to what was a preparation area, where servants would put the final touches on the dinner or keep the meal warm should there be a delay. Guests would come in the main entrance of the bishop's residence. It was ornate and displayed authority. If the guests came for dinner, the dining room of the bishop's home was beautiful. You could tell the Greshams, who built the house, were extremely wealthy. This was the parlor where the bishop would informally meet with people. In the music room, on any particular evening, they may have had someone playing piano or a string quartet performing. The staircase to the second floor is ornate and again portrays the belief in the bishop's spiritual authority. While the upstairs is gorgeous, it displays a different picture of the bishop. This was the bishop's bedroom, a simple chest of drawers, a twin bed, a rocking chair, and a fireplace. Next to his bedroom was a private chapel for reflection and prayer. The house is now owned by the Galveston Historical Foundation. And across the street is the Sacred Heart Catholic Church, built in 1903. The location of the church is why the Galveston Diocese bought the Gresham home for the bishop's residence. Must-see number 6 is Moody Gardens. In the aquarium pyramid, you can check out penguins, stingrays, sharks, and many other types of fish and aquatic wildlife from around the world. Next, in the rainforest pyramid, you can get close-up views of endangered plants and you can see all kinds of animals from various rainforests around the world. And the third pyramid is the Discovery Pyramid. It offers fascinating interactive exhibits throughout the year. You can go to moodygardens.com for the current exhibit. After a long day of sightseeing, why don't you just take a moment, relax, and stroll through their beautiful gardens? Or maybe take a step back in time to the early and middle 1800s and take a ride on the Colonel paddle wheel. There's always something fun, fascinating, and educational to do at Moody Gardens, so when you're in Galveston, check it out. Number 7 is Schlitterbahn Waterpark. If you've never been to a Schlitterbahn Waterpark, I'm telling you, it's a great time. Whether it's an adrenaline-pumping water slide, relaxing in the lazy river, or sunning on the beach, Schlitterbahn has you covered. Check it out when you visit Galveston. Number 8 is downtown Galveston. Oh, and don't forget to hang on. In just a couple minutes, Any Way You Travel will tell you about an amazing place to check out that very few people mention and even fewer people know about. So whether it's getting a cup of coffee or shopping inside a shark's head, downtown Galveston has something for everybody. Maybe you want to enjoy the amazing architecture. Or you might want to take a ride on an old-fashioned streetcar. Maybe it's art that trips your trigger. Well, you'll find it in downtown Galveston. For instance, take this building. It has a slight irregularity. Not all of these pillars are alike. This particular pillar was damaged by a Union cannonball during the Civil War. How amazing is that? And this is the Grand Opera House, built in 1894. It hosted everything from vaudeville acts to musicians in the modern era. It survived the 1900 and 1915 hurricanes. Or if you're like me and a big fan of Christmas, stop by the Strand Brass Christmas on the Strand. They have a huge selection of Christmas decorations year-round. It'll have you singing Joy to the World in the middle of July. Okay, here's our bonus tip for the 9th place you need to see when you're in Galveston. It's really cool and very few people seem to know about it. Behind this fence in what used to be a pirate museum that no longer seems to be open are the ruins of the home of the infamous pirate Jean Lafitte. He settled in Galveston with his buccaneers in 1817. This is what's left of the mansion he built, called the Red House. Some of it was reconstructed in 1870. The house was part of a fort and small village that he built on this site. The second floor of the house, which no longer exists, was set up to handle cannons. This was a very luxurious home. When the United States demanded that he leave Galveston, he burned his home and fort and headed to Mexico. What's left of the Red House is located at 1417 Harborside Drive. Check it out when you visit Galveston, Texas.